Welcome to a place where love is not bound by time, where passion is not limited by age, and where intimacy becomes the language of souls. Here, every story is a journey, a look that shatters loneliness, a touch that awakens desire, a battle between fear and surrender, and a love that stretches beyond skin, beyond years, into eternity. These are not tales of fantasy, but the raw confessions of hearts that dared to feel, to risk, to break the rules of silence and discover truth in unexpected places. Love comes quietly, sometimes forbidden, sometimes terrifying, but always worth every trembling moment. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to be truly seen, truly wanted, and deeply cherished beyond all doubt, then you are home here. It happened in the quietest way, almost too small to notice at first, yet it struck like lightning. A look, not just any look, but one that seemed to see beneath the skin, one that pierced through the layers of silence and years of being unseen. That gaze did not skim the surface like so many others had done before. It lingered, it studied, it softened, it carried something that had long been forgotten, the weight of desire wrapped in respect, the warmth of tenderness mixed with curiosity, the kind of look that makes time stop and makes the air grow heavy. It was not the kind of look that politely glances away out of courtesy, nor the shallow glance that takes inventory of age and flaws. It was deeper, heavier, almost reverent, and in that moment something long buried trembled awake. A part of the soul that had been silenced by years of loneliness, by the endless ache of absence, by the slow fading of being touched, being wanted, being desired. That look brought it all back, as if someone had struck a match in a dark room and the flame refused to be ignored. For years, the body had been treated as though it had passed its season. Smiles had grown polite, touches had grown scarce, and the mirror had become a place of resignation rather than anticipation. But when his eyes met with mine, there was no resignation in them. They did not carry pity nor obligation. They carried hunger, yes, but not the kind that takes. It was hunger bound to reverence, a hunger that seemed to honor what it wanted. It felt dangerous, but it also felt alive. The weight of that gaze pressed into the skin, burning a trail down the body, as if it were being touched without hands. Heat flushed through veins that had grown too cold, lips parted in breath that felt too shallow, and for the first time in years, there was a sudden awareness of being alive in flesh, not just a mother, not just a divorcee, not just a woman moving through quiet days. Alive as in burning, trembling, waiting, wanting. The mind tried to argue, to push it away, to remind of the numbers, of the differences, of the world outside that would frown. But the heart whispered louder. The body whispered louder. The look itself whispered louder than all reason, saying without words, "You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. You are here and you are wanted." The air between us grew charged, almost unbearable. It was only a look, yet it unraveled so much. It made every sound fade, every clock hand freeze, every barrier begin to crumble. And in that silence, the heart remembered what it felt like to be chosen, not out of convenience or duty, but out of raw, unshakable desire. That look gave back what had been stolen by years of abandonment, the thrill of anticipation, the wildness of being desired without conditions, the beauty of being seen not as an age, but as a woman alive with passion. There was trembling inside, not of fear, but of awakening, the kind of trembling that comes when a soul tastes fire after living in cold shadows too long. And though nothing yet had been spoken, though no words had crossed between us, the look had already spoken enough. It had said what lips dared not yet say, that something forbidden was stirring, something irresistible was blooming. That night, lying in bed, the mind replayed it again and again. The way his eyes held steady, unashamed, almost protective. The way it felt as though years had melted away in an instant. For the first time in so long, hands brushed against skin, not out of routine, but out of rediscovery. The body remembered its own hunger, remembered its softness, remembered its ache. That gaze had awakened not only a heart, but every nerve, every longing. It was terrifying and thrilling. Terrifying because it meant the walls that had been carefully built around loneliness were cracking. Thrilling because beneath those cracks flowed warmth, like sunlight after endless winter. A look, only a look, but it had undone everything. It had torn apart the silence of years. It had lit the fire of forgotten desire. It had painted the body not as a shadow, but as light. The truth is, it was not just the look itself that mattered. It was the feeling it carried, a reminder that passion does not expire, that longing does not wither, that love can still awaken even when the world has convinced you otherwise. That look shattered loneliness not because it promised forever, but because it proved in an instant that being seen, truly seen, is enough to bring a soul back to life. And once life returns, there is no turning back. It began so softly, almost unnoticed, like a shift in the air before a storm. At first, it was laughter shared in the spaces where silence had lived too long. Jokes that slipped out naturally, glances that lingered too long before turning away, the way a hand would brush against mine and stay for a breath longer than it should have. There was nothing loud, nothing forced, just a quiet unfolding, a storm that gathered slowly but carried a weight that could not be denied. The first time his hand truly held mine, it felt like more than skin against skin. It was as though he was reaching past the surface, past the years of emptiness and walls built high, to touch the part of me that had been waiting, aching, forgotten. That touch made my breath catch, not because it was bold, but because it was tender, unguarded, so sure of its place. Vulnerability washed over me, terrifying and intoxicating, because for the first time in so long I felt exposed, not in weakness, but in being seen. Every laugh became an opening. Every word spoken in those late hours stripped away another layer of defense. He asked questions not like someone curious about the past, but like someone desperate to understand the present, to know the rawest truth. And I answered in ways I didn't expect, honesty pouring out like water breaking through a dam. Words turned into confessions, confessions into admissions, and each one pulled me closer until there was no longer a safe distance between us. When he leaned in for the first kiss, it was not rushed or hesitant. It was deliberate, careful, almost reverent, lips meeting lips not in hunger alone, but in a deep need to confirm what our souls already knew. That kiss carried the weight of unspoken desire, of longing restrained too long, of secrets whispered only in the dark. It made the body tremble, not because it was strange, but because it felt like coming home. That was when the storm truly broke. The touch of his hand against my face, the way his thumb traced my skin as though it were sacred, the warmth of his body so close it became impossible to tell where mine ended and his began. There was no script, no plan, no roles to play. It was raw, messy, imperfect, but real. It was a rediscovery of a body I thought had grown quiet, a body I thought was no longer meant for passion. But under his touch, every nerve, every hidden ache, every forgotten place came alive again. There were moments I wanted to pull away, to run from the vulnerability that felt too sharp, too dangerous, but each time his presence pulled me back. His words weren't grand promises or practiced lines. They were simple, soft, and real. You're beautiful. I see you. I want you. Words I hadn't heard in so long, they felt like fire when they touched me. And in his voice, there was no doubt, no hesitation. He wanted not just the body, but the soul behind it. In the quiet of those nights, when the world outside disappeared and only the two of us remained, I felt the weight of every wall collapsing. His hands, his lips, his whispers didn't just awaken desire. They awakened trust, and with it, the terrifying freedom of letting go. Vulnerability no longer felt like weakness. It felt like the deepest kind of strength, the strength to be known, to be desired, to be loved in a way that made time irrelevant. The passion between us was intoxicating, yes, but it was more than that. It was sacred, almost frightening in its depth. Each kiss was a prayer, each touch a confession, each breath a surrender. It was forbidden by the world's eyes, perhaps, but in ours it felt like destiny. There was no shame in it, only truth. The truth of two souls colliding at the right moment, two bodies rediscovering fire that had never truly gone out, only waited for the right spark. Every time his arms wrapped around me, every time his fingers traced the curve of my skin, it was like being rewritten. Age meant nothing, years meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was the way we looked at each other, the way we breathed each other in, the way we surrendered to a love that felt both brand new and ancient at the same time. In those moments, there was no loneliness, no past, no fear of what lay ahead. There was only now. The storm raged quiet and fierce within us, shaking everything I thought I knew about desire, about love, about myself. It stripped me bare, not only in body, but in soul, and yet I had never felt more whole. The storm that began with a look had become a fire no silence could ever extinguish. Fear came first, as it always does, fear in the form of a whisper that crawled into the mind at night, asking questions no heart wants to answer. What would they say? What would they think? Could this be real, or was it a fleeting illusion, a dangerous mistake dressed up as desire? Age was a shadow that clung heavy to every thought, a reminder of years that had already passed, of expectations etched deep by others. The mirror was cruel, the world was louder still, telling me love belonged to the young, that passion was something with an expiration date. But then there was the body, and the body does not lie. The body knows truth before the mind dares to speak it. Every touch, every kiss, every moment of closeness carried warmth too real to deny. It wasn't a fantasy, it wasn't borrowed time, it was life itself, pulsing through veins that had nearly forgotten their purpose. In his arms there was no age, no shame. There was only fire, and the fire didn't ask for permission to burn. The battle was constant, and it tore me in two, one side telling me I should step back, that I should silence this madness before it consumed everything. The other urging me to hold on, to let go of the chains of doubt, to stop listening to the world that had left me cold for too long. And each time he looked at me, each time his hand traced my skin, each time his lips pressed against mine with reverence and hunger, the battle grew weaker. The mind was clever, but the heart was relentless. The fear spoke of shame, but the body answered with need. The fear spoke of years, but the soul whispered of eternity. The fear begged me to walk away, but love pulled me closer until surrender felt like the only truth worth living. To fight against it was to fight against myself. To surrender to it was to step into freedom. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trembling not from his touch, but from my own thoughts. What if I lost him? What if it was only temporary? What if I gave my whole heart and it shattered again? But then he would stir beside me, reach for me without even opening his eyes, pulling me into his chest as if I were the only thing that mattered. In that embrace, all the noise faded. His breath against my skin, his hand pressed firmly over mine, reminded me that love does not measure time the way the world does. Love simply exists, and when it does, it demands to be lived fully. Each surrender was terrifying at first. Letting him see the body without defense, letting him hear the voice of my fears, letting him break through walls built high by years of loneliness. But every time I surrendered, I found not judgment, but acceptance. Not rejection, but longing. Not pity, but passion. With him, surrender was not weakness. It was liberation. Love in his arms was not love in the pages of books or in the promises people throw so carelessly. It was raw, unpolished, burning in a way that consumed and healed all at once. It was love that made no sense to the mind, but but made perfect sense to the heart. It was love that silenced the whispers of shame because it was too powerful to be hidden, too alive to be denied. The fear of society's eyes still lingered, of course, walking into a room knowing people would question, knowing they would whisper, knowing they would never understand. But when his hand slipped into mine, steady and unashamed, those whispers lost their power. Judgment shrinks in the face of love that refuses to bow. And with him, I found the strength to stop bowing, to stop apologizing for feeling alive, to stop asking permission to be desired. The world may measure worth by years, but love measures it by depth. And in the depth of what we shared, I discovered something I never thought I'd touch again, the kind of intimacy that unravels you completely, leaving you bare yet stronger than ever before. It was not the absence of fear that gave me freedom, but the courage to surrender despite it, to step into his arms and let everything else fall away, trusting that love was enough. The mind will always whisper. It will always find reasons to pull away, to question, to remind of the weight of time. But the body, the heart, the soul, they speak louder when the right person comes along. And when love burns with this kind of fire, surrender is no longer defeat. It is the only way to truly live, and so I chose to live. What started as fire in the body slowly turned into something far deeper, something that could not be named easily. At first, it was hunger, undeniable and consuming, the kind of desire that makes the heart race and the skin tremble. But soon, passion softened into something more sacred, something that lingered long after the fire of the moment had passed. Every kiss began to carry a weight that went beyond desire. Every touch became a promise. Every moment of closeness whispered that this was more than skin meeting skin. It was soul meeting soul. There were nights when his lips moved against mine with urgency, but even in urgency, there was reverence. The way he held me was not as though I was fragile, but as though I was irreplaceable. And in that difference, I found something I never thought I would again, a love that made even the most physical of moments feel eternal. The body gave itself freely, yes, but it was the heart, the soul, the unspoken truth between us that made it more. In his arms, intimacy was no longer just passion, it was worship. Time had always been the enemy. Time took youth, took beauty, took so many things I thought defined worth. Yet here, in this love, time lost its power. His touch erased the years, not by pretending they weren't there, but by making them irrelevant. The body he held was not compared to younger ones. It was seen as the only one he wanted, the only one that mattered. That realization broke something open inside me. For so long, I believed desire had an expiration, that passion was reserved for the young. But his love taught me that eternity is not found in the number of years lived, but in the way a single moment can hold forever. Our passion deepened with each night, but it wasn't the fire alone that changed me. It was the quiet after, the way he stayed, the way his hand traced my arm long after the urgency had passed, the way he whispered things that had nothing to do with the body but everything to do with the heart. In those moments, I understood that sex could be more than heat. It could be connection, union, an unbreakable thread tying one soul to another. What began in desire grew into devotion. What started with passion grew into peace. There were times I looked at him in disbelief, wondering how something so forbidden by the world could feel so natural, so right. The difference in age that society would condemn only seemed to make what we had stronger, because it stripped away illusion. It forced us to see what was real, to hold to what mattered, and what mattered was not the years behind us or ahead of us, but the depth of the bond we shared in the present moment. Every kiss was more than a kiss. Every embrace was more than touch. They were eternity folded into seconds. Love like this changes everything. It silences shame. It disarms fear. It rewrites the meaning of intimacy. With him, my body was not something to hide. but something to celebrate. My age was not a barrier, but a testament to all the storms survived, all the strength carried, all the beauty that still remained. And with every time he reached for me, I felt the truth that real love does not fade with time, because it was never built on time to begin with. It was built on depth, on soul, on the meeting of two hearts at the precise moment they were meant to collide. We loved in whispers and laughter, in fire and stillness, in moments that stretched far beyond the night. It was not about what the world thought, nor about what was expected. It was about us, about the way we fit into each other's silences, the way we found home in each other's arms, the way passion turned into prayer. And in that bond, I learned something the years had tried to take from me, that love is not measured by how long it lasts, but by how deeply it is lived. And so, passion became love, and love became something unshakable. Not love defined by time, but love beyond time. Not love bound to skin, but love that lived in the soul. It was the kind of love that made me believe in forever again, not as something promised, but as something already here, alive in every touch, every kiss, every breath we shared. And in that forever, I finally found myself. If this story touched you, if it awakened something inside, remember, love has no age, no limits, only depth. Subscribe, like, and share, and join me again as we uncover more true stories of passion, awakening, and the kind of love that changes everything. Until next time, never stop believing in love beyond time.